Good afternoon, members-elect. Welcome back to the Chamber. My name is Glenn Rutland, and I am the Deputy Clerk, House Procedures and Committees, and I will be chairing the roundtable this afternoon. First, we will resume the roundtable with the member-elect for Hay River North, Mr. Simpson.
Thank you. It's an honor to be back in this House to serve the people of Hay River and the Northwest Territories for a second term. I want to congratulate and welcome all the returning members and the new members. I've had a chance to speak with most of the new members, and even though winter is approaching, the sense of renewal in the air makes this feel like a spring assembly. Each of the past two elections have brought significant change, and I feel like we are now in a position to begin delivering the change that the voters want to see. It won't be easy. The NWT is facing many challenges. With the collapse of the oil and gas markets, the impending closure of the diamond mines, and a decade-long decline in mining exploration, the overall economic outlook of the NWT is poor, to say the least. While Yellowknife still seems to be somewhat insulated from the current economic downturn, the hard economic times are already being felt in every other region. On top of that, our residents suffer the negative impacts of addiction, family violence, poverty, lack of education, and a variety of other social factors at rates much higher than the rest of Canada. However, I'm optimistic that if we face these challenges head-on and commit to real change, that we can overcome these issues and create a foundation that will allow our residents and the generations to come to grow and prosper. Each region faces its own unique challenges that need to be addressed. In Hay River, we're facing a number of ongoing issues that have been ongoing for a number of years and negatively affect our health and safety, our children's education, and economic viability. I've heard more concerns about our healthcare system than anything else during my 4 years as an MLA. Despite being able to attract nurses and physicians, the Hay River Health Authority is unable to retain them, resulting in a revolving door of locums and a seemingly constant staff shortage. This negatively affects patient care, and many people are terrified of getting seriously ill in Hay River. It's not that the staff don't want to live in Hay River. A number of them have commented that they love the town and want to stay, but they just can't work at the authority. This is simply unacceptable. Our facilities should not be driving staff away. The concerns are growing because not only does Hay River have the fastest growing population of seniors in the territory, we're also slated to get a 48-bed long-term care unit. I want to say that this issue needs to be dealt with by this Assembly before it reaches a crisis point, but some believe that we're already there. The sudden closure of the Hay River high-rise also has highlighted Hay River's housing shortage, and not just social housing, but all types of rental units. The media always talks about the high cost of rent in Yellowknife, but we face the same costs, and the loss of the high-rise's 122 units has made it next to impossible to find a place to rent in Hay River, whether you're a doctor or a low-income individual collecting income assistance. A number of people who had put down roots in Hay River have already been forced to leave the territory, and a number of low-income and vulnerable individuals are now living on the street or in unsafe conditions. As we all know, housing shortages exacerbate other problems. It makes it nearly impossible to attract new residents, which prevents businesses from being able to grow and can prevent vacant positions, such as those at the health center, from being filled. What is most frustrating about this shortage is that there is a plan to alleviate it, and that plan has been waiting in the wings for quite some time. The problem is that the GNWT has been shortchanging Hay River millions of dollars per year in infrastructure funds, as determined by the GNWT's own funding formula. As a result, the town doesn't have the financial means to put in the road, water, and sewer infrastructure that are needed before new lots can be developed. This municipal funding shortfall needs to be addressed in a significant way in this Assembly. A commitment to do so was made in the last Assembly, but we failed to deliver. In the meantime, the GNWT needs to step up and work with the town to make this development happen. With the potential for Pine Point Mines, Aurora Pellets, a 48-bed long-term care facility, and a new fish processing plant, Hay River's economy and population are actually poised to grow. It's one of the few places in the NWT that can say that. If just 200 people move to Hay River as a result of this growth, which is far less than predicted, the GNWT would receive another $6.5 million a year in federal transfer payments. However, instead of facilitating this, the GNWT has been ignoring these opportunities to the detriment of Hay River, the NWT, and the government itself. Another issue that's been discussed in this Assembly by a number of previous MLAs from Hay River, but is yet to be addressed, is dredging. Hay River came into existence because of its strategic location on the Great Slave Lake. Having a safe port that can be traversed by vessels of all sizes is essential for the safety of our residents, and it's essential for our economy. The buildup of silt is getting to the point where many people believe it threatens the viability of the shipping and fishing industries. There is also concern that at some point, the state of the port could also cause the Coast Guard to relocate operations to Yellowknife. Given the centralization that we've seen over the years, this doesn't seem unlikely. We can't allow this problem to reach a crisis point. We have to stop being so reactive and start looking beyond this fiscal year. I noted that Hay River has some real economic potential. Unfortunately, that's looking years into the future, and right now, we're facing difficult economic times, like most other places in the territory. This Assembly needs to do more to promote economic diversification and keep money in the north. One of the easiest ways to do this is to make sure that we spend as much of our own public funds as we can within the territory. Each year, the GNWT spends hundreds of millions of dollars on infrastructure, but efforts to make sure that that money goes to northern firms who employ northern residents have all but disappeared. This is low-hanging fruit. This isn't money we need to attract to the north. We just have to make sure we don't send it south. If we want to pay people to work and help them get training instead of subsidizing their housing and providing income assistance, then we need to ensure that we keep these funds in the territory. There's a number of ways we can do this. For example, we can break larger contracts into smaller ones so that northern companies can compete with southern firms. And we can make better use of negotiated contracts, which have proven very successful at providing local employment and training. We also need to begin to ensure that these large P3 mega projects start delivering more employment and training benefits to northerners instead of just paying lip service to that idea. We can do it with small negotiated contracts, we can do it with P3s. If members wish to learn more about how we can derive greater benefits from the GNWT's procurement process, I recommend that you look up the report on government procurement done by the 18th Assembly Standing Committee on Economic Development and Environment. There was a lot of talk about economic diversification in the last Assembly. Unfortunately, despite numerous strategies and action plans, I saw very little action, and I see very little in terms of results. Costs for small businesses remain high, and along with red tape, they're increasing. The government needs to understand its role when it comes to the economy. Instead of creating plans that tell entrepreneurs what to do, we need to create partnerships with industries and small businesses, actually listen to them, and work with them to implement solutions that will yield results. Also, the government needs to step back from its incursion into parts of the private sector. In and around Hay River, the GNWT now does things such as manufacturing, general contracting, and highway maintenance, all things that have traditionally been in the domain of the private sector. It's bad enough that northern companies have to deal with high costs and with southern firms who undercut them. They shouldn't have to worry about the GNWT taking work away from them. While I strongly believe that diversification is important, I don't discount the importance or potential of mining and oil and gas, and we must continue to promote and pursue investment in these areas. However, we can no longer ignore the criticisms of industry. We must streamline our regulatory environment so that the laws governing non-renewable resource activity are clear and expectations and timelines are reasonable for all parties, while at the same time maintaining the stringent environmental protections that are built into our legislation. Because resource development and environmental protection are not mutually exclusive. While we do this, we need to keep in mind that the GNWT doesn't have the sole authority over land. We must ensure that as we move forward with legislative development, Indigenous governments are included. Again, I recommend to the new members that they look up the Standing Committee on Economic Development and Environment's report on the development of devolution legislation and carefully consider those recommendations. In order to help facilitate some of this resource development, we need the infrastructure to make it a reality. And I join many of my colleagues today in calling for the completion of the Mackenzie Valley Highway. The highway would bring economic opportunities to communities up and down the valley, expand tourism, attract billions in investment, and drastically change the fortunes of the territory. I would also like this Assembly to consider taking a new approach to economic development in small communities. As my colleagues are aware, many small communities don't have the same opportunities to develop local economies that we have in larger centres. I believe that we need to start partnering with local and Indigenous governments with the goal of developing local industries that are sustainable. Fort McPherson Tenton Canvas is a perfect example. It's the largest private employer in the community and manufactures a product that's desirable around the world. A similar model could be used in communities to set up industries that capitalize on their natural advantages. Or a completely new approach can be developed. Regardless, we have to try something different because the current approach is failing. One of my former colleagues who represented a number of small communities would often talk at length about how a single job in a community could have a large impact that spread beyond a single individual. For example, he would note that sometimes the reason a child wouldn't go to school is because the parents didn't have a job, so they wouldn't get up in the morning to take their kid to school. However, even if we create a job in the community, that child's parents could be dealing with addictions issues that prevent them from holding that job. This exemplifies one of the biggest challenges we face. All the issues that we're facing are interrelated, and there's no one way to fix a problem without addressing all of the other issues that feed into it. That's why when we look at things like building economies or improving education systems, we have to take a more holistic approach than we've done in the past. We can no longer allow government departments to operate in silos, and we need to build strong partnerships with local governments. The old way of doing business has proven not to be effective, and I hope this Assembly supports a real change to the status quo approach that we've seen in the past. I mentioned education, and I truly believe that education is the most powerful tool we have to change the fortunes of the territory and the best way to insulate ourselves against the boom and bust of mining and oil and gas, and to reduce our dependence on government. We need to make a concerted effort to provide better education so that future generations will fare better than us. There's a lot of concern about the diamond mines closing, but we've had them for decades, and we're still facing an uneven distribution of wealth and a number of social problems, so clearly mines alone are not the solution. I personally believe that education is freedom. If you have a university degree or a journeyman, you probably don't need social housing or a lot of other social services. So not only is government not spending money on you, you're probably contributing to the economy, which means there's more money to provide better social services to other people who need them. I strongly believe that what we need is a concerted government-wide effort to provide education to our youth that will provide them with that freedom. That means developing and implementing an education strategy from the ground up with grassroots input, buy-in, and support that focuses on everything from prenatal care through early childhood, JK to grade 12, post-secondary, and even on-the-job training. There has to be that continuum from before a child is born until after they get a job. The top-down approach that we're used to seeing has not been working in the territory. I've mentioned partnerships a number of times, and that speaks to the uniqueness of our territory. While we have a territory-wide public government, for now, we also have a number of Indigenous governments who, over the coming years, will be drawing down authority over a number of services that are currently provided by the GNWT. This means that we need to develop programs in conjunction with those governments who will be equal partners in delivering them. I will also add to the chorus of voices today that we've heard calling on this Assembly to settle all outstanding land claims. We need to get this done, and nothing should be off the table in terms of how we can achieve this. This is a necessity. We must do it. Well, I could go on about a number of other issues that we must deal with and that we will deal with during this Assembly. I'll end with a comment on government accountability. This has been a heated topic of discussion among the general public over the past few months, and it's come up in nearly all of my conversations with new members over the past week. It's clear that the status quo is unacceptable. I believe in consensus government, and I also believe in learning from our mistakes. We owe it to the public to make changes that attempt to address the deficiencies with accountability that we experienced in the last Assembly. What do those changes look like? I'm not sure, but it's a conversation that we need to have. With all of that said, and with 1 minute remaining on the clock, I just want to say that I look forward to working with all of the new members and with the returning members for the benefit of the people of the territory. And I really am excited, and I'm optimistic, and I have a good feeling that we're going to do great things. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. Next, we will turn to the MLA-elect for the Sawtoo, Ms. Chinna.
Good afternoon. I would like to congratulate my colleagues on a successful campaign and now representing your constituents in your elected ridings. I would like to take this opportunity also to acknowledge Cease McCauley, who was a advocate for women in leadership and who was also an advocate for the Mackenzie Highway. And it's an iconic and a historical moment right now that we have 9 women who are elected into the 19th Legislative Assembly. I'd also like to acknowledge Ethel Blondin, who was a mentor and who had held her seat as the MP for the Liberals and who has mentored me through this process. And with her humble experience, she has given me the tools to go forward and to represent my region. Also, I'd like to thank my region for selecting me to be representing their region as the first Indigenous woman to represent the Saugatuck in the 19th Legislative Assembly. It's a humbling experience and it's an honor. And going forward, I would like to express that the need for my region is huge, and it goes, we're talking about education and healthcare, looking at the economic development, mainly looking at the bridge and the opportunity that it has to offer, looking at tourism from the Toledo Bridge and the Mackenzie Highway, and building relationships with our Indigenous groups. Right now in Cova Lake, I went and I would like to concentrate on that community because we do have a school system that is existing there right now. The school system is very poor. It's got a one-room classroom. We've got teachers that are there who are committed to be there, and with no housing. The housing there is limited. They're limited for water and sewer, and the children are being taught in this environment. I would also like to look at also the learning disabilities as well too in the school system, and looking at filling the positions. I'm familiar with the Jordan Principal, and Toledo and Delaney have taken those initiatives into hiring an extra person to be dealing with the ADHD, the FAS, and we also have the Down syndrome students. I would like to be able to work with the education system in Saugatuck because to integrate those students with the school system, because I went into the school and they're kind of left to their own and they're not incorporated with the rest of the students. And I found it really sad for us to see that in this day and age, like we don't have programs and training for these teachers' assistants that are showing their commitment to be working with the children with disabilities. And looking at our healthcare system, during my campaign, there was a number of situations and scenarios that were expressed. One of them was, again, from Cova Lake, that there was a child who was severely sick and had called the health center in Inuvik, got direction from the doctor to say that their needs were not so severe. The parents ended up driving the child from Cova Lake to Good Hope, which is a 3-hour drive. Took them 9 hours, and the child was in agony, so much pain. Got to Inuvik, a medevac was called, was sent to Yellowknife. They didn't have the resources to help the child. Later on, sent off to Edmonton. During that time, the child stayed and was incurring this pain and enduring this pain, and was sent to Edmonton, and the doctor said in Edmonton that the child should have been medevaced directly to Edmonton right from the beginning. These are the kind of situations that the community of Cova Lake is experiencing right now. The other thing is that they also have their nurses' facility is probably smaller than the offices that we work in. In those offices, there's 3 of them, and there's a gym that's attached to it as well too, and I don't feel that these are adequate facilities for the nurses and the nurses to be working in. The nurses come in every 3 months, and I thought, like, right from the people who are suffering from heart disease, diabetes, that they don't get the adequate medical care that they need. I was looking at prescriptions that they acquire, who delivers them, who sends them in, how do we take care of our patients in the Northwest Territories. I know that Coble Lake is not our only isolated community. I think of the communities in Nunavut as well too. And I think that together as a Northwest Territories, as a government, as a 19th Legislative Assembly, we need to address these concerns. And we need to not let them result in death at the expense that we're not dealing with these scenarios in these situations right now. And I feel that majority of them can be preventable with the proper and adequate care that we need. I'd like to move on to the Toledo Bridge. I'm in support of building infrastructure to the capacity. We need these projects in order for our regions and our territory to survive. We need to make the money. We need to get our residents educated as well too. You know, coming with these major infrastructure projects comes with education and training as well too. And education and training is significant. We need that in order to survive as the Northwest Territories. Projects like this, we need to emphasize on trades. We need to make sure that a lot of our people that are involved in these projects walk out and they actually do have certification. And also supporting our local business as well too, and not going south in order to pursue these contracts, that we try to keep the money in the Northwest Territories. I'd also like to emphasize on tourism throughout the Northwest Territories. I think there just needs to be a lot more promotion on it and available funding and how this program actually works. I think that acquiring small businesses in each of our regions, in each of our locations, that this will build our capacity as well too, and education needs to be supported amongst this as well. And also, I'd like to also comment on our land leasing policy and our projects that we have that are out there currently. I know that we do have housing and our land leasing are in conjunction, and they do go together. Our housing projects don't meet the need of our residents in the smaller communities compared to the tax-based. I think of also that the land leasing policy also requires that the client needs to have a land lease in order to pursue a housing corporation package. Right now we are leasing at assessed value at 5% annually. Those lease payments could be about $25,000, $3,000, and which is not to the affordable person who is on pension, who is on income support, and who is trying to move and become independent in their own region. I think we bottle cap these our clients in order for them to go forward. We need to really structure and look at a way that we can deal with these scenarios. And looking at the community lands and the land development, there's climate change is a significant issue as well too, because there's limited area for the communities to actually expand. And looking within my region, there's limited expansion for each of the communities because we do sit on the riverbank. With the bridge coming through, it's going to open access to lands that they're not able to access right now, so the development and planning needs to be considered. I'm concerned because it's actually going to open up the access to the Great Bear Lake by Delaney, and they're known for their tourism and their fishing, so I would like to look at that and try to see what we can do as a government to try to protect those areas. Also, I'd like to just touch a little bit on housing and share with you that during my campaign, I went to Fort Good Hope and I had a conversation with the Gashagotin district. And they actually had a housing initiative that they had taken on between the federal government and the GNWT, where they actually deal with their own housing initiatives. And they are actually taking their independency to go forward and to start housing repairs on behalf of their clients in the region. So I think building those relationships with our Indigenous groups are important. We need to start really emphasizing on that, because at the end of it, they are our economy, they are striving for a land claim, and they are in self-government negotiations right now. I would like to work towards that because I would want to see what is the government going to look like once those self-government and the land claim settlements are done. What is our responsibility? What are we going to be looking at, and where are we going? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chinna. Next, I'll pass the floor to the MLA-elect for Thabacha, Ms. Martselos.
Good afternoon. First of all, I want to congratulate everybody in the House on the newly elected MLAs that will be serving in this 19th Assembly. Bonding and serving with each of you to further our priorities and mandates is a key. Successfully serving all the people of the NWT to the very best of our abilities and potential. I want to thank the amazing community of Fort Smith for giving me the opportunity to serve the riding of Thabacha and the people of the Northwest Territories. Forming all necessary partnerships with all levels of government, Indigenous governments, local and federal governments, and the private sector is key to success. Solutions and decisions made here affect all people of the North. Being realistic and using common sense is a trait and a positive way of ensuring the people of the North are really being served properly. All my priorities are not rated. I feel each of my principles and my priorities are all equal in importance. My first principle, supporting true consensus government through empowered communities with strong regional governments. My priority, maintain the promise that Fort Smith remain the education center of the NWT. Supporting the plan to develop the Polytech University/University of the North is vital. We must ensure this is truly a unique university that people across the North, Canada, and the world will want to come to study. This Polytech University is the North headquarters must remain in Fort Smith. My second principle, settling of the outstanding land claims of Acacia, the Detcho, and the NWT Métis claim. The priority, we must have an obligation to truly walk the talk and seriously support the settlement of these claims to move forward. We must not be an obstacle. Land claims settlements are positive economic opportunities, not only for the group that settles, but is good for the region and good for the Northwest Territories. My third principle, balanced economic opportunities. The expansion of the Tolson River Dam is vital to the entire Northwest Territories. This opportunity of green energy is vital. Hydro is the cleanest form of energy. It will create a climate of new opportunities, create new jobs, lower the cost of living, provide new training opportunities in the trades, which gives new hope to the people of the Northwest Territories. We must also open up the North to balanced development in partnership with business, our Indigenous partners, and with consultation with the people to improve our economic situation and use creative new ways of doing business. This must be a priority. My next principle, development of a social envelope. Priority, creating a universal subsidized childcare program is a must. A full-service territorial addiction center is vital to address a true northern solution. Develop a process of retention of doctors to serve the communities so proper care is given to our residents. Being creative to ensure this happens must be a priority. Must develop a plan to address the housing issues of the NWT. Using creative new ways to use capital dollars must be examined. Our seniors and elders who paved the way for each of us into today's society must be recognized. Their contribution to all of us must always be a factor in all future decisions. In closing, together and in true consensus government, we have an obligation to the people of the Northwest Territories to set the stage for hope, cooperation, equality, and ensuring the Indigenous issues are truly dealt with. The people of the NWT deserve a sincere, honest version of accountability, transparency, and an open-door policy. Changing the way we do business and using creative ways to find solutions is extremely important. I want to thank you for giving me an opportunity to state my priorities and look forward to ensuring solutions for developing the 19th Assembly's mandate. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Marcelos. Next, we'll turn to the MLA-elect for Trinidad Willide, Mr. Norton.
Marcicho, Mr. Clerk. Mr. Clerk, I'd like to start by introducing myself. My name is Steve Norn. I'm elect for Trinidad Willide. My hometown is Denny New Quan. It's the place where I cut my teeth and where I grew up. And I'm proud to say that I'm happy to represent the riding of Trinidad Willide. And I'd like to congratulate all the new MLA elects, and I'll also mention the 3 acclaimed members. You guys look really stressed throughout this whole process. I want to quickly mention, I want to also thank the voters that Trinidad Willide riding. I found out afterwards that our riding was number 2 in voter turnout, which is at 70%, which is really good. I'm really proud to say that. We're number 2 behind my colleague from Nunakput, who is number 1. Yeah. And that just goes to show, you know, that people in my riding are really passionate about politics, and I want to say Marcicho to them. Women in politics. I was raised by my great-grandmother. And my first order of business when I came to the office, I put a picture of my great-grandmother up. And I've always been surrounded by very powerful women. And very happy to say I'm flanked by 2 very influential, powerful women. And you guys are very good role models for our young generation. Thank you. I'm proud to be standing beside you. And my colleague from Satu mentioned Ethel Blondin. And that made me think, you mentioned that name, and all of a sudden it brought me right back, you know, I was in high school, and the principal called me in. He said, yes, Ethel Blondin is rounding up youth from around the north. We're getting this new thing up in Ottawa called the Youth Employment Strategy. And the principal's like, why do you want me? I'm like, I'm in the Hay River here, like going to high school, and I'm from Denny, quite a little skinny little kid. I'm like, I'll jump all over that opportunity, I'll take it. So I did. And I always seem to have these influences around me, and it's like a sign, you know, like this is like destined to be working with you, and I'm so happy to be here to work with you guys. And I've always said, whatever government department we have, the working population should always be representative of the population that's served, and I think we more than did that with this assembly. And when I did my door-to-door, you know, you felt helpless, you know, because a lot of times during your campaigning, people poured their hearts out to you. Mm-hmm. And you felt helpless because you're not elected at that time. They told you all sorts, they have all sorts of questions for you, requests, and they're hoping you're the next hope. And I'm hoping that all the members here elected stick to your word. I really hope so. And I also want to say, we have job certainty here for the next 4 years. A lot of the people that we went door to door do not have that. To me, that doesn't sit right. A lot of that doesn't sit right to me. So we owe it to our constituents, the people that voted us in here, to do our best for them. And also when I sat down here, someone pointed out to me that this is the premier seat, so I won't get too comfortable here.
This one is.
Oh, this one is?
This
Oh, pretty
one
close.
is.
Okay, maybe, okay. This one was so pretty
You're
close?
not stealing it from me.
Okay, good. Well, anyways, yeah, I just want to let the House know and people of the North know that I do not intend to run for a cabinet position. My first duty is to the people of my constituency, and that's what I plan to do. So I want to let you guys know firsthand. And I also want to say during my door-to-door, one of our knowledge keepers gave me, asked me a really important question. They asked me, what do you think the spirit and intent of our treaties are? Boy, that just blew me away. It's just such a profound question, It made me think, because I didn't have an answer right there, because, I always was a very cocky young man, thought I had all the answers. I didn't. I was stumped. I did a lot of soul searching. And all of a sudden, these glimpses started to pop in my head as I went through my campaign. And here's my glimpse, here's my vision. And I'm putting it on my paper, I'm not looking at my computer. I had this glimpse of a family. Could be around the lake, could be around Satu, could be around the Tuneda, of this figure going home, greeting their family, saying, "Naranis Tatua, I love you" in my language. Or it could be, "I love you" in whatever language is in your writing. Going up, listening to their loved ones, having a couple of rabbits on the back of their shoulders, carrying it in, walking it off the land, sitting down at the kitchen table and talking about their day. With their family, speaking in their own language. And this other image came to me. This vision, I guess you'd say. All of a sudden, oh my God, there's this alarm that went off. This person that brought in the rabbits put this stethoscope around their head, or around their shoulders. I have to go to work, I'm sorry, I have to go to surgery. I have to go. Say something in your language, give your loved ones a kiss. I gotta go, I'm sorry, enjoy the rabbits. And on the way out, in this glass case, there's a drum. In this glass case, on the way out of the house, there's a sash, or a fiddle, moccasins. We were told here before we came, we should talk about our vision about 4 years down the road, 10 years down the road. I'm talking about this little vision I just spoke of. It could be 100 years down the road. How good would that feel if our people are still speaking our language, are being our doctors, our lawyers, our professionals, our engineers, and hopefully you're not spinning our wheels here in the next 4 years and doing something about that. So that was my vision, and that really, really kind of gave me a direction where I want to go in my campaign. So now I'm going to pick up my paper again. So now, like a lot of voters in the last little while, I guess you'd say are going to go through a little bit of voter fatigue. They've already voted us in the House. There's a lot of municipal elections. And now finally we're going to have our federal election. And we're at the mercy of the next government that will be coming to power. And I said in my campaign, one of my platform items were for our young people to vote. Get out and vote, get out and vote, get out and vote. And I'm saying that right now. You got one more election to deal with. So I'm telling the youth again, get out and vote. This is your chance to have your voice to be heard and to elect our next government at the federal level. And with that being said, we're at the mercy to set our priorities for what is going to happen with that government as well. So we'll see what comes of that. We don't have a crystal ball, but we'll see how that plays out. We were asked what steps the JNDP should take to achieve this vision. Land claims. this, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Yes, we need to settle our land claims. We need to give all our Indigenous governments some breathing room. For me, I'd like to see this government take what's the French term? The laissez-faire, they call it, a hands-off. Give them a little bit of room or a variation of it to give our negotiating teams some chance to get work done. We owe it to our people, we owe it to our businesses, we owe it to people in North to do that, to get work done. A lot of our elders past have wanted to see a lot of our land claims come to closure, to fruition. I think we owe that, and there are a lot of them are not getting any younger. I think we owe it to them to see that ratified. Jobs and economy is something else that also I encountered in during my talks with our constituents. We need to reinvigorate our economy. We're so dependent on it, and I'm hoping that we review a lot of our policies such as BIP policies, affirmative action policies. We need to take a good, long, hard look at them because we got to give our businesses and our people the best chance at opportunity. We're not doing that. We haven't done that in the past assemblies. Affirmatively, we need to shape these policies to give our average Northern businesses successful and profitable and self-sufficient. One thing that I did in my research is there's a program in the United States, they call it the 8A program. I'm hoping we could kind of mirror something like that and implement it here in the Northwest Territories. That's the direction I'd like to see our government go. Addictions. A lot of you might know already, I'm a former RCMP officer, and I worked with the Public Prosecution Service of Canada as a witness coordinator. A lot of you don't see this, but I was privy to see those many, many, many files of just, you see all that pain and suffering. And 99% of it's because of alcohol and drugs. It hurts me. A lot of you haven't had somebody knock at your door at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. Young mother, all bloody, holding her baby and not begging for your help. You'll never know that pain, and it still sits here. And now, sitting in this house, hopefully we could do something about it from taking a more proactive approach and deal with addictions. Because that's addictions and problems with alcohol create such a burden to our correctional system, our emergency services, our police. And I hope we could do something like that in this assembly. And I want to say to everybody here too that I myself suffer from addictions. I had a problem with alcohol for many, many years. And I'm proud to say to you that I've been sober for almost 7 years. And I want to say that those that are suffering right now with addictions, that there is going to be help out there. There is help out there, and I'm going to do my very best in this house to help you and to be a good role model. Another thing that really irked me during my door-to-door was housing. Oh, that one really just, again, one of those things that just gave me fuel to my fire during my constituency was, I spoke to somebody in one of our communities and they said, Steve, I wish you could help us out. You know, we went to NWT Housing and we applied for a program to renovate our homes. It really going to cost a few $1,000s to fix our windows, fix our doors, and it would have saved us X amount of dollars in fuel savings. We talk about cost of living and stuff like that. And they told me that, you know what, we were denied. We had to go through so many hoops, and we went through 4 or 5 times, and we were denied every single time. I'm like, where's the disconnect here? We're talking about a policy, a procedure here that They fell through the cracks, and all of a sudden, you're not going to help this person, one, keep them warm in winter, and two, help them save money. Simple fix. Hopefully, we look at some of those things while we're in this house. And I've heard like a chorus line now, so just coming to me now, that we're talking about policies. That's where we need to start and take a look at it. I'm not saying we should take a machete through it and take a hardline approach, but we need to just work with our governments, with our bureaucratic system, with our people from all levels of governments. Work together and have good common sense approaches, humanize our policies, and let's not forget our people at the grassroots level. And in closing, I'm proud to be here. I'd like to say that we hope we work all in collaboration. I like to use the word synergy because I think that really captures how we need to work with each other. Because if one of us drops the ball, it means we all drop the ball. So we should all help each other with our issues and help people in the North because they're depending on us. I want to thank my family and my friends, people who have supported me. I want to thank Alfred for being a role model for me, because it wasn't too long ago we were sitting in Diavik in the office there, we were joking along, and we're here. And I'm humbled, and I'm proud to be sitting with you. Masicho.
Thank you, Mr. Norton. Next, the floor shall go to the MLA-elect for Yellowknife Centre, Ms. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I want to start by acknowledging that I'm on Chief Dry-Geese territory, and I'm honored to be here. I am also proud to represent Yellowknife Centre. I'm here as the voice for a very diverse community downtown that has a diversity of issues and a diversity of incomes. My vision is to provide people with the tools to realize their full potential, and I'm going to go through what some of those tools are. Starting with the economy, the very best thing we can do for ourselves to start with is to settle land rights negotiations and self-government negotiations. There is a way forward using the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. This Assembly has recognized and supported that declaration, but the next step is to implement it and make it meaningful in our land rights negotiations and line up our position with the federal position and with the position of the Indigenous government organizations. I really feel that adopting, not just adopting, but implementing UNDRIP, as it's called, will provide Indigenous government organizations with control over their land and their government for development or conservation purposes, but in any case, it would provide land certainty. And the result of that would be good for the Northwest Territories. And it would be good for our primary industry, which is mining. And it is my hope that mining continues to be our primary industry to the extent that we have any control over it. So I recognize that commodity markets are not within our control. Attracting investment is not within our control, and we can see that with the fact that we have 2 mines that are fully permitted that are not being built because either the commodity prices are too low or their investments, they can't attract the investment. But there are ways for us to assist in exploration, specifically through the Mining Incentive Program. That program returns $5 for every dollar invested. The government could certainly do more by putting money into that. We also need to take a better look at diversification. I talked about this in my last speech, but the need for it is even greater now than it was before. And there are 3 areas that I've talked about consistently here. The first is tourism. Tourism has been a very successful industry in Yellowknife and in the Northwest Territories generally. And it is time for us to share the infrastructure dollars that we're currently putting into roads with tourism. We need a visitor center here in Yellowknife. We need more campgrounds and more parks for road traffic to visit. We need more money into product diversification so that the tourists who come here spend more time here and spend more money. So tourism, I know, doesn't pay like the mines, but it is still a growing segment of our economy, and it needs more investment. The second area with many benefits is retrofits. If we could retrofit public housing, private housing, commercial office space, we would derive three kinds of benefits: jobs, a reduction in greenhouse gas emission, and a reduction in utility bills. So there are studies that have been done that give a lot of detail about the return on investment. It's impressive and it's necessary, and we need to look at it very seriously. It addresses a number of issues that are important to all of us. The third area, which is an economic area, but also obviously a social development area, is childcare. Childcare is another area in which there are three distinct benefits. The first is jobs. The second is enabling parents to go back to the workforce after they finish their parental leave. And the third is the development of the children themselves so that they are ready for school when they enter junior kindergarten. So an investment in childcare is essential. And it's worth noting, again, that 11 of 33 communities in the NWT don't have licensed childcare. This is an essential priority. It also requires infrastructure investment. The biggest barrier to providing more childcare spaces in the NWT is having the appropriate space to host those childcares. And what we learned last time is that the regulations are very stiff in this area, and I appreciate the reason for it, but it makes it out of reach for nonprofits to build these childcare spaces. And so we need infrastructure investment. And I believe that our best option for that is to build childcare spaces in schools, because that is one place where all children will be from the time they start childcare until the time that they graduate or move into a higher level school. So the infrastructure investment in childcare is a must. The third is the next area I heard a lot about, again this time as I did last time, was the cost of living. Power bills are very high in Yellowknife. Yellowknife subsidizes electricity rates for the rest of the NWT, and people find them onerous. They end up being one of the largest household bills that they have. We need to come to terms with the cost of our power, whether that's investing in clean energy, subsidizing power rates, finding more customers. We have to come to terms with not only the price of it, but the fact that the infrastructure for the Northwest Territories Power Corporation is aging and will need a major investment of replacement in the near future. Some of this burden could be taken on by the development of Tolson, but I don't see that happening soon. That's a very long-term project with distinct risks of its own. The third area that's very important to me is services for seniors. In the last assembly, not one new unit of seniors housing was built in Yellowknife. That's in spite of the fact that 134 seniors households are added to our population every single year. So what we end up with is a 6-year waiting list at Avens, and more than a quarter of the public housing waiting list, which is an astonishing 330 households. More than a quarter of that list is seniors, and we also have seniors in emergency shelters. We need housing for seniors. We also need a bigger budget for retrofitting housing for seniors so that they can stay in their own homes if they are able to do so. Right now, the budget for the entire NWT is barely adequate for a small community, let alone for 33 communities. We also need to invest in home care for seniors. The longer they can stay in their own homes, usually the happier they are and the less money they cost the public purse. So I am anxiously awaiting a study that was commissioned in the last assembly and should be delivered soon. A third area for seniors is the day program. There was a day program until 3 years ago. It was closed because the service provider, Avens, decided that it was too risky a program given the diversity of needs of the people within it. But there's never been a replacement for this program. And the result of that is that social inclusion needs of elders are not being met, and at the same time, respite needs of families who are caring for these elders are not being met either. So this is an absolute essential. We need a day program in Yellowknife. I want to talk a little bit also about children. I've talked about the importance of early childhood development, and I had this in my speech last time as well. The very best investment we can make is in children ages 0 to 3. If they get a good start at that age, they will be set up to succeed at school from the time they begin through until the end. And when we don't make that investment, we shortchange those children, and we pay for it, and they pay for it for the rest of their lives. It's just not fair. We must do better. The other area under the heading of children is improvements of services for children in care. We all heard what the Auditor General had to say about services provided. They are inadequate at the very least, and in some cases harmful. So there is a quality improvement plan in place, but we have to make sure that the social work positions are adequately staffed throughout the Northwest Territories so that services to children in care are improved. And one of the other areas under the heading of children is food security. Most of the NWT residents who experience moderate or severe food insecurity are children, and they depend on feeding programs at school, and they depend on their parents going to food banks. It's not acceptable. There needs to be a comprehensive food security strategy in the next assembly that deals with the question of how to keep people from experiencing hunger or making trade-offs about the quality and quantity of food that they are consuming. This is absolutely essential. We have 20% of our territorial population who are experiencing food security. The next area is income assistance reform. There have been some changes to income assistance which are useful, but it is still a payroll program. It is still a very punitive program where people are trapped in their monthly allotment, being asked to provide information about what they earned and what they spent. What we need is to pilot the basic income guarantee, where we pick a number of different communities of different sizes and in different locations, and give people a monthly amount of money to live on, and see whether they are able to make that work to get themselves and their families out of poverty rather than having them on the payroll system. The next area is education. The system simply is not delivering the results that we want in terms of the quantity and quality of high school graduates. We have money now for Jordan's Principle, but that money is not guaranteed into the future. It needs to be guaranteed so that children with disabilities have the help they need to succeed. We also need to revisit the funding formula for education to ensure that schools that have heavy numbers of children who need extra support, in fact, have the money to provide that support. I am a supporter of post-secondary education and of the revamped Aurora College or the creation of the new Polytechnic, whichever way you look at it. This is something that we really must do. In the area of health, I heard lots from my constituents about problems with the startup of the hospital. We have some real quality control issues there to do with a number of different areas. I don't think they're unique to a hospital startup, but we need to pay attention to them because they're having a negative impact on the people who are in hospital trying to recover from their illnesses and injuries, and they're in a situation where the care is compromised by the physical structure. The other thing to do with health generally and the hospital in particular is that it's a Cadillac facility being run on a shoestring in terms of staffing because of the shortage of nursing and other health professionals. We need a strategy to attract and retain nurses to this territory so that we can do better with health care. The last area I want to talk about is the one that's probably most important to my constituents other than the economy, and that is the situation in downtown Yellowknife. The homeless and intoxicated population in downtown Yellowknife are from all across the territory. They are not just people in Yellowknife on hard times. They are people from all of your communities who have come here for different reasons, and they have stayed here. Maybe your community is dry and they can drink here. Maybe they were in jail and they stayed here when they got out. Maybe they were in hospital, they stayed here when they got out. But the situation is that we now have a large population of people who have chronic addictions and chronic homelessness. Not always both together, but a variety of both of those problems that need housing, and they need programming. There was an evaluation of the combined day shelter and sobering center that was completed this year, and it has 11 specific short-term recommendations about how services at the sobering center and day shelter could be improved. We need to bring the city and the contractor on board to implement those recommendations so that we can improve services to people on the street and we can assist people in feeling safe downtown. That was something I heard very often. People do not feel safe. They are intimidated by the intoxicated population. And it is on us to help those people feel safe downtown whenever they happen to be there. So the depressing thing about my list is it's very much like the list I gave 4 years ago. That doesn't mean nothing happened. It means not enough happened. And once again, we are in a change mandate situation. 11 new MLAs last time, 12 new MLAs this time. We can't fool around anymore. These chronic issues that we've all mentioned, intoxication, homelessness, poor education results, these are ongoing issues that we really have to drill down on this time and not make an incremental change, but make a really significant change. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Next, we will turn to the MLA-elect for Frame Lake, Mr. O'Reilly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My apologies for missing this morning as I was over at the judicial recount. I'll carefully study the statements made by my colleagues so I have a better sense of your priorities and how we can work together. Congratulations to the new MLAs and the returning ones. I'm very happy to be here to work with you. We've been asked to talk about where we want to see the Northwest Territories in 10 years and what we can do in our 4 years in this Assembly. But I'd like to start with some thoughts about the Frame Lake riding, what I heard at the door during the campaign, and I'd also like to acknowledge the work of volunteers on my campaign. The Frame Lake riding is a diverse area within Yellowknife. It stretches from this Legislative Assembly over to Woolgar Avenue. It includes commercial properties along Old Airport Road, Northlands Trailer Park, which is undergoing some tremendous revitalization, public housing in Sissons and Lanky Courts, and single-family dwellings along Forest Drive, Bromley Drive and Court, and Knutson Court and Avenue. It's a vibrant part of Yellowknife with many Indigenous and immigrant families. It's my home, and I love it. I'd like to thank the residents in Frame Lake for coming out to vote in 2019. Voter turnout went from 28% in 2015 to 45% in this year. That's a tremendous increase, and I also want to acknowledge the work of elections. NWT, as the voters list, was in much better shape this time around, and their promotion, and I also want to thank them for their promotion of increased voting opportunities. Frame Lake was a much anticipated race, and I wish to thank my competitor, Dave Ramsey, who ran a strong campaign, presented a credible alternative. I wish him nothing but the best for his future endeavors. I recognize that not everyone voted for me and that even more residents were not able to or were not inclined to vote. I will still work very hard to represent their interests and respond to any concerns brought to my attention. As to what I heard at the door, it varied a lot depending on where I was in Frame Lake. In the lower income areas, the main concerns involved public housing, income support, child care, and education. In the higher income areas, the main issues tended to be around cost of living, especially power bills, climate change, the economy, and a variety of other issues. I really appreciated the opportunity to engage residents and will stay in touch by personally delivering one of the 3 annual newsletters personally each year. I'd like to thank all those who volunteered in my campaign. Our families loan us to this great institution, and I'm no exception. My partner, Suzette Montreuil, I could not have done it without your support. I also need to thank my official agent, Bob Wilson, and the many other volunteers who helped out. I also would like to thank those who have sent me messages and congratulations. Your support is very much appreciated. So, where could and should the NWT be 10 years from now? Here's the dream that I have, and I hope that we can all share parts of it and agree upon it. We would have a diversified economy where our peoples are more fully employed and engaged in a variety of activities that include mining, tourism, arts and culture, research and development, agriculture, and the fisheries. We would produce a lot more of what we consume. The workforce would more closely reflect the cultural and other diversity of the NWT, with Indigenous peoples taking their rightful place in senior management. We would have vibrant small communities, regional centers, and a capital that serves all of our residents. Indigenous languages would continue to be spoken in each of the regions and taught in all our schools, with improved access to all government services in our official languages. There would also be a strong French first language education system that would control its own admissions. Il y aurait aussi un solide système d'enseignement en français, langue première, qui contrôlerait ses propres admissions. All of our citizens would have access to affordable, suitable, and adequate housing. Seniors or knowledge holders would be able to age in place, have access to appropriate services. All of our communities would be self-sufficient in terms of their energy needs. We would minimize and potentially eliminate fossil fuels through green, renewable energy such as solar, wind, and small hydro with efficient storage systems. No more big grids, no more big energy projects. Communities would own and manage their own energy systems with appropriate support and training, incentives for self-sufficiency, and there would be a solid plan for dealing with the climate crisis, mitigation and adaptation. Caribou herds would once again be thriving through a variety of habitat protection actions, predator control, harvest management, and human disturbance thresholds. There'd be a fully funded and functioning integrated environmental and resource management system based squarely on co-management and continual improvement through audits and state of the environment reporting. Legally binding water agreements would all be in place to protect us from upstream threats and would be supported through appropriate community-based monitoring and traditional knowledge. In terms of governance, there would be a new confederation of regional Indigenous governments and a territorial public government with strong community governments, all recognized with roles and responsibilities set out in a constitution for the NWT. We would have no one living in poverty. There would be affordable, adequate, and suitable housing for all. No more family violence. Mental health supports in place to help build healthy families and communities. What concrete steps should we take in the next 4 years to achieve this vision, this dream? What should our priorities start to look like over the next 4 years to take us along this path? I'll start with the economy. I said during the campaign that I don't know what else we can do to attract more investment and resource extraction, as this is mostly dictated by commodity prices and financial markets. What we can control is the completion of the remaining land rights agreements, and this needs to be a high priority. We need a more flexible approach and new mandates to allow the regions to evolve as they see fit. I look forward to a new approach to negotiations from GNWT and stronger involvement by the regular MLAs. We also need to fully implement the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and make sure our policies and legislation are consistent with our obligations under the Declaration. We need to continue the co-drafting process with post-devolution legislation and regulations. We can and should also better promote ourselves as a great place to live, work, and do business with greater certainty than many other places. Our resource management systems are different by design, but there is a lot of guidance and assistance available. We also need to make sure that we get a fair return for resources extracted by reviewing royalties and taxation, the scale and pace of development, and benefit retention. We need a new arrangement with the federal government to ensure that we retain more of our own source revenues. A review of our Heritage Fund is also required during the term of the 19th Assembly. We need to stabilize our fiscal regime to the greatest extent possible. We need to invest more into our people, not just big infrastructure projects. We need evidence-based decisions. Housing, education, universal childcare, guaranteed basic income, energy self-sufficiency, and food security are the long-term investments that are needed to build sustainability and healthy communities. These should be the priorities when our government goes to Ottawa and the federal government for support and investments. This was certainly not the case with the 18th Assembly, as Cabinet cut programs and services to fund big infrastructure. I believe we need to focus on systemic changes that will reduce our cost of living by building more self-sufficient communities. We need to refocus the NWT Power Corporation towards community energy self-sufficiency rather than relying on big projects and big grids. Renewable energy investment will help lower the cost of living for remote communities and all energy consumers. We need a better coordinated approach to the climate crisis that includes carbon pricing. We need to set a lead department and give them the authority to work with others inside and outside government. GNWT spending should consider impacts on greenhouse gas emissions, and there should be strong public reporting. We should build stronger food security to help lower our cost of living by promoting more local food production through community gardens, commercial market gardening, and rejuvenation of local fisheries. We also need to work together on Nutrition North to focus on food security that includes country foods and inter-settlement trade. We need to increase our investment in our education system and return to the Education Renewal Initiative as the way to further improve outcomes. We also need to build a strong network across the NWT for post-secondary education that includes the community learning centers, campuses in Inuvik, Fort Smith, and Yellowknife. There's huge potential to attract and focus research and development on our needs and build a knowledge economy. Children and housing need to form the foundation of our new priorities. We should increase funding for early childhood development programs and services, as we all want to get our children off on the right foot. This is simply one of the best investments we can make as a government, with tremendous cost savings down the road. This necessary work on children also includes the universal child care system, for which we already have a feasibility plan. We need to keep on top of the necessary improvements to child and family services, and that includes, I believe, a child and youth advocate. I'm not convinced that a northern-based treatment center is our best solution to addictions. Aftercare, on-the-land programming such as the Arctic Indigenous Wellness Foundation's Healing Camp here in Yellowknife are a good start, but we need similar efforts in each of our regions and also available at the community level. I look forward to continued efforts on our downtown area and believe that a managed alcohol program is part of the path moving forward. Without housing, our residents cannot properly participate in their communities or in the economy. The Housing First approach has shown some successes in Yellowknife and elsewhere, and we need more options for seniors and young families. I look forward to working with all the other MLAs in Cabinet on this important suite of priorities under the themes of economic diversification, investing in healthy communities and children and families, and addressing the climate crisis. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about how we can work together. Change was certainly a major theme and outcome in the recent election campaign, and I certainly am happy to be part of that process. Are there ways to improve collaboration and consensus government? Absolutely. As happens every assembly, lots of ideas and recommendations were put forward by the Special Committee on Transition Matters. I was a member of that committee for the 18th Assembly. Some of our recommendations included better orientation and ongoing training of MLAs, setting clearer and fewer priorities, options for the structure and selection of cabinet and standing committees, improved and more collaborative budgeting, a midterm review with a focus on priorities in the mandate, and improvements to how legislation is developed, introduced, and reviewed, including future regulations. At the end of the day, we cannot possibly do everything that has been raised here today. We will have to make choices. We all come to this government with different backgrounds, education, and experience. We are not going to agree on everything, but that is also a healthy reality. We should take advantage of the diversity here to help make better decisions and build a stronger Northwest Territories. Merci, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. O'Reilly. Now, for the final word, I will turn to the MLA-elect for Yellowknife South, Ms. Welsnick.
Thank you, Mr. Rutland. Good afternoon, colleagues, and congratulations to you all once again on my behalf. I also want to extend my gratitude to you. I was very nervous last week, but you have all been very welcoming, and it's been a really positive start. And thank you also for hanging on. I am the last speaker. Whether that's good fortune or bad luck, I'm not sure. The good news is we've all said a lot of similar things, so there's a lot of overlap to get started from. The bad news is that it'll be sounding a bit repetitive by the time I'm done. I also want to say thank you on this first opportunity to speak here to Yellowknife South for placing your trust in me. I began to carry that trust the morning after the election, and I can say that I promise that every day I'm going to make my best effort to use my best judgment, to use my best efforts to advance the work of the Assembly on behalf of Yellowknife South. The priorities I want to talk about today took root over many months of consultation, grew and focused in the course of the campaign. It's my honor to present this vision and these priorities on behalf of Yellowknife South. My vision is that the Northwest Territories is going to be a leader in Canada. I believe we can show leadership in reconciliation with Indigenous people, and that we can be a leader in establishing modern relationships with Indigenous governments. I believe the Northwest Territories should be a sought-after place for investment. It's going to be built on a foundation of balance and sustainability. And I believe that the small population that we have, focused and concentrated in small regional communities, should be an opportunity. It should be an opportunity to provide individualized programs and services focused on the needs of those communities, drawn and delivered by those communities. And as such, I think the Northwest Territories can be a leader in a government that is driven by positive outcomes for its people. And after the campaign period, I am more convinced than ever that this vision is achievable because of all the people that I have met throughout the process of the campaign, the ideas that they've shared, their talents, and their dedication. Our people truly are our strength. My priorities are focused under 4 themes: health, education, economy, and governance. I'll start with health. In many ways, to me, that's the foundation. I have 3 priorities. The first is that we identify and show quantitative improvement in the social determinants of health. That means things like safe housing, food security, family well-being, and both physical and mental health. I think we need to start seeing people as whole persons. But we have to understand that the ability and the opportunity to learn requires that foundation of health, that our prosperity is going to be impacted by the web of things that impact who we are as people, from our families and our communities to our society around us. And this was a major issue in the constituency for me because a lot of people spoke about the downtown social issues. We are not going to get ahead facing some of the social issues that we see on our streets downtown that are playing out across the Northwest Territories unless we have a long-term vision that truly looks at people as whole people. Something that truly starts from the very earliest stages of maternal health and early childhood. Some of the key social determinants that I'd like to highlight now. I'll start with housing. There is a shortage of housing across the continuum of housing needs. Emergency housing, transitional housing, early entry housing, first stage housing for people looking to get into the market, rental housing, and seniors housing. I think we need to be leveraging our partnerships with other governments, the federal government in particular, but also the private sector who are looking for opportunities, as well as with nonprofits who have creative ideas and on-the-ground know-how. I also suggest we should be creating opportunities for collaboration between departments on this issue, because sometimes the issue or the input that's actually going to affect housing might require an input from a different department. For example, for seniors to be aging in place, often what they need is support from mental health or health care to provide them part-time care in their homes. Food security. In terms of food security, I'd suggest we look at the entirety of the production and supply of food in the Northwest Territories and find a way to have a meaningful impact on local food chain supplies. There's agriculture initiatives, and there's also access to traditional food. The Sustainable Livelihood Action Plan is one that we should be looking at to ensure that it is accurately and effectively implemented and actioned. As well, transportation. How can we innovate the transportation of food across the Northwest Territories so that there's more reliable supply to small communities? Healthy families. In this respect, I would focus on universal childcare. Universal childcare to me should be the end goal, but it doesn't mean that it's an all or nothing end game. We've already heard today, I believe, from more than one person why this is such an important and excellent return on investment. It's so much potential for children. It helps parents who may want to return to the workforce. It has the potential to lower the cost of living, and it makes the Northwest Territories someplace that people will want to come. It will make us potentially a unique place in all of Canada. I recognize that this was a goal during the last Assembly, but it's time to move it forward, I'd suggest. Junior kindergarten was an important step forward, but when we created that, we didn't necessarily create the option for aftercare, which left a whole other problem for families. As I've said, it's not an all or nothing. You can prioritize the availability of childcare spaces first and move forward gradually, perhaps in a way that uses short-term changes to the system, but maintaining the end goal of universality. The next aspect of the whole person care approach that I'm championing, I'm actually separating out onto its own priority because it's so important. And so for me, priority number 2 under my healthcare theme is that we support positive mental health and long-term reductions in addictions, including reducing the severity of addictions. And how I'd suggest we do that is with post-treatment long-term aftercare, both for addictions and mental health, one that includes relapse prevention and community-based supports. Community-level networks are a critical aspect to ensuring that people can reintegrate successfully into their communities. I believe we should consider establishing mobile units of mental health professionals who can go regularly to the communities to shore up those local supports. I'd suggest having mental health-specific systems navigators, or patient advocates, or both, so that patients and their families, the people who are already doing the care, can easily access the best services available. And I'd like to see us encourage and support the community-level programs that are happening within nonprofits. The Arctic Indigenous Wellness Foundation, for instance, the Fox and Smash programs, for example. These nonprofits are doing excellent work. And when we work with our nonprofits, I think we should start considering looking at different ways of funding them so it's not project-based, but we can actually look at core funding initiatives that will improve their efficiency. And I'm going to add in here restorative justice. If it seems odd that I'm sticking that in under health, I'd suggest that it's not. Because if we're going to be truly restorative for people who are in conflict with the law, I think we need to realize that very often these are people who are themselves traumatized and who will benefit from a healthcare and whole person approach to healing. And similarly, for victims of crime, if we're talking about restorative processes, that we must be looking at the victims of crimes as well, and that they too are whole people, and that they too are in need of care and of programming that is trauma-informed and culturally appropriate. And my third priority under my health theme would be that we prioritize patient-centered prevention and as an approach to improve individual wellness. 2 ways I'd suggest we could do that. One is, again, community-level and culturally safe programming. I'd like to see us truly empower the front lines of healthcare services, such as is already beginning in the Indigenous health units here in HSSA, as well as, again, with the Arctic Indigenous Wellness Foundation in the nonprofit sector. I believe it's time to start championing these approaches and expanding them. And also the development of wraparound, patient-centered approaches to care. This is a philosophy that, too, already has its seeds happening in the healthcare systems right now, but it's important that we ensure that we've invested enough so that healthcare professionals can truly develop those patient relationships. This will also provide a better workplace and more workplace satisfaction for healthcare professionals, and again, hopefully make the Northwest Territories a destination of choice for them. Education, here I have 3 items. Early childhood, I've already spoken about the importance of that under healthcare, but I would suggest that we should remember that you have to engage the education sector as well, so that there's an overlap between the health and the education, so that there's culturally appropriate programming for young children. From K to 12, similar to one of my colleagues, I would like to support and invest and action the Education Renewal Initiative. This is a model that addresses many challenges faced across the Northwest Territories. Family engagement within schools, recruitment and retention of teachers, impacts of health on students, the need to prioritize different paths to completion of education, infrastructure challenges in many of the schools, particularly in small communities. And it focuses on the importance of ensuring that every student's capabilities and capacities are being encouraged and supported to the best of that student's ability. This framework, however, cannot succeed on the backs of the teachers or the schools themselves alone. We must find a way to ensure that there's proper collaboration and cooperation between the health system and education, as well as infrastructure, housing, different departments to provide all the different possible services that are going to be required to truly make this initiative a success. And finally, adult learning. I also support a Northwest Territories-based polytechnical university. It's one that I hope is based on diverse partnerships between the communities, between different governments, with industry, other existing educational institutions such as the Collège Nordique or the Decinta University. I think this should be a shared priority between all. It should be a shared opportunity. For Yellowknife, having a new campus is a priority, but other communities will have other priorities, and they should again be all part of moving this initiative forward. I hope that we would be including high-demand professions, nursing, social work, education, and skilled trades. But this is also an opportunity to be visionary. We can look at areas of our particular and unique strengths, rare earth minerals, permafrost, land-based programs, and some other highlights that many of you have already mentioned today. Again, this is an opportunity to make the Northwest Territories a destination of choice. The economy. This is certainly something I think many of us have heard about, and I heard about at many of the doors that I was at. What will we do when the diamond mines close, and what will we do to reinvigorate our economy? I have 4 priority items here. First, that we settle all land and self-government claims and ensure that existing agreements are fully implemented. I believe we need to provide land ownership certainty, should accelerate land use planning, and I believe in acknowledging nation-to-nation relationships. I'd like to see us encourage power sharing and partnership. Second priority is to reinvigorate the mineral resources sector. And here there's 2 things I'd like to mention. One is the infrastructure gaps. That's in transport, land, air, water, energy, communications. And I'm not going to pick, because that's not my job necessarily. If I could choose, I'd have them all. I hope that we can leverage partnerships, leverage funds, but maintain a goal of completing these projects and not only studying their feasibility. The second part for me under mineral resource sector is to look back, actually, to the 2014 Mineral Development Strategy. The goals of that strategy are as alive today as they were back then. Create a competitive edge to improve investor confidence, improve the regulatory environment, enhance Indigenous engagement and community capacity, promote a lasting legacy, and enriching the workforce. Those 5 goals are still 5 things that would, I think, not only improve the mineral resource sector, but in fact many of our economic sectors as well. In my view, it's time to, in fact, improve the implementation of that strategy. I'll highlight just a few. Firstly, with respect to regulations and regulatory environment, I would like to see regulations that are responsive. And we have that opportunity now because it's time to start developing the regulations for the Mineral Resources Act. Ensure that deadlines are timely and enforceable. And as far as promoting a lasting legacy, industry is looking to have social license. Companies and corporations want to be good neighbors, and investors are increasingly expecting corporations to in fact be accountable for their carbon footprints, among other social issues. I think if we can create the conditions that allow industry to achieve those goals, that again, we will be making the Northwest Territories a destination for investment. My third priority under the economy is to support the growth of, and both in the number as well as in size, of our northern-owned and operated businesses. Let's make sure they have the opportunity and the ability to scale themselves up when appropriate. I think we can do this by reducing the cost of doing business, which will hopefully also lower the cost of living, because this is done through infrastructure again. And in this regard, I would highlight energy and electricity cost and reducing the reliance on diesel, which has to be trucked up and is expensive across the Northwest Territories. I'd come back again to regulatory systems. And in this regard, again, responsive and modern. Considering the 2-for-1 rule, perhaps, where we don't layer on new regulations. Every time you get in a new regulation, you must at least take one, if not another one, off. Interdepartmental cooperation as well. Sometimes the regulations in one area are impacting the ability to have growth in another. For example, operating a business in public housing. This to me seems like exactly the place where we would want to encourage small-sized businesses. And land access. I'd be in support of having a plan to begin transferring lands that are already within a municipal boundary in active consultation with Indigenous governments. And a task force to ensure that there's better procurement and contracting so that we are keeping wage dollars in the North. There are many ways to do this, and I believe a task force could come back with options in a very quick turnaround to provide solutions. Priority 4, last one in this category, to build the foundations for a knowledge economy. The Northwest Territories is still a frontier, but I think we can harness that. A knowledge economy is more than just a polytechnic university, it's an approach. It's an approach to an economy that is innovative, entrepreneurial, creative, where we can actually use the get-her-done spirit of the North and actually say that that's how we want to build the economy going forward in terms of all of our diversification strategies. We can support innovation with research and development funding that is scaled to the size of the businesses we have in the North, and encourage collaborative hubs. There's already an artist space up in Inuvik. I think there can be manufacturing startup spaces elsewhere in the Northwest Territories. I know it's the end of the day, but I'm almost done. My last theme was governance, and 2 priorities here. The first is to create opportunities for communication and cooperation laterally and up and down through departments. What I mean by this, in terms of our frontline service providers, they are often the ones that know exactly the best thing to do to make a tiny change that will improve their work life, as well as the services that they're giving to people in the communities. I think there should be regular meetings between people who are providing social programs, for example, both inside government as well as in the nonprofit sector. There could similarly be, as I've already talked about, regular meetings between education and health, between justice, health, and housing. All of these different groups that are trying to solve the same problems should be having regular meetings to make sure that they're not at cross purposes, but that they're actually providing the best services together. And at a senior level, I'd suggest there should be budget efficiencies, so that budgets are not overlapping, people aren't afraid of their budgets being amalgamated or clawed back, but that they can in fact work together to ensure that there's enough money to do the things that these departments all want to be achieving. And I think we can lead by example, and it's heartening that many of us have already spoken about this. We as 19 can demonstrate the value of good communication, of collaboration, and of working together. And it is a historic assembly, but it'll be even more so depending on what happens in the next 4 years. My second and last priority is to create a culture and expectation for active implementation and evaluation of all government programs and services. Our solutions should never be a process. Solutions should be measurable results that impact on people. And as we set our goals and our expectations, there should be incremental performance indicators. Every step of the way, you need to be able to measure what you're doing. As you measure them, there should be a clear point of accountability, somebody responsible for the thing that they're supposed to be getting done, and someone with sufficient authority that if it's not happening, that person has the ability and the power to make change. I believe the Northwest Territories can be a leader, and we can be a leader in governance that is not divided by partisanship, but in fact is united behind a collective vision. It's a vision that I believe will succeed if we value action, value accountability, and I look forward to working with all of you, working together towards a collective vision. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wozniak. Just before I bring the roundtable to a close, a few remarks to those members-elect who are new to the chamber. I have to say it was a very impressive debut. Congratulations on delivering your first speeches, and for many of you on your first day here. Thank you to all members-elect for your participation today and your words and wisdom as you begin this priority-setting process. There are some clear themes that are emerging, but there are also many different views on these priorities. The challenge, or more importantly, the opportunity that is before you, is to communicate and collaborate over the weeks ahead to reach a consensus on the priorities for the 19th Assembly. I would like to remind members that we will reconvene tomorrow at 9 a.m. in the caucus room, and I would just ask that members please join me in wishing the MLA for Montfouille a happy, significant milestone birthday. The members' roundtable is adjourned. Thank you.